Rain traced silver lines down the glass of Sterling Tower, turning the city outside into a blur of light. Inside, the lobby floor was polished to a mirror-sheen marble, and steel and clean angles. Ava Sterling stepped through the revolving door at 8:02 a.m. Her driver had offered an umbrella at the curb. She had left it in the car. A few drops clung to the dark wool of her coat and dried almost at once in the warm air. Her heels clicked a steady rhythm across the stone. The morning crowd parted as she passed. Security nodded. The front desk glanced up and then down again. She checked the time with a flick of her wrist, the face of her Swiss watch catching the light, 2 minutes behind schedule. It bothered her in the way a crooked frame might bother someone else. Not enough to stop, just enough to sharpen her expression. She stopped a few steps from the security gates, her gaze snagging on motion near the entrance. A man hurried in through the revolving door, awkward in his rush. His coat was too thin for Seattle in late fall. The navy fabric darkened where the rain had soaked through. One hand clutched a cardboard coffee cup. The other held a much smaller one. The little girl trotted to keep up her purple raincoat, swishing with each step, the hood askew over messy blonde hair. Her backpack looked almost as big as her torso. It bounced against her shoulders, the zipper charm tapping in a soft, irregular beat. She tilted her head back to stare up at the glass ceiling, as if the building itself were a planet she had just landed on. Ava watched them cross the floor, feeling the familiar tightening in her chest that she never quite dignified by naming. The receptionist scanned their badges, and the gates opened with a soft hum. "This is Sterling Dynamics, not a playground," Ava said. She had not raised her voice. The man halted mid-step. Coffee sloshed a bead of dark liquid sliding over his knuckles. He turned toward her. His jaw clenched for a second, then eased. "Good morning, Ms. Sterling," he said. "The after-school program closed last minute. I sent the email. She will stay out of the way." The girl looked from her father to Ava, her brow pinched in confusion. She seemed to sense something sharp in the air, but did not understand its shape. "We run a billion-dollar company here, Mr. Parker," Ava replied, "not a day camp." A few employees near the coffee stand suddenly became very interested in the lids on their cups. "Understood," he said. He did not argue. He tightened his grip on the girl's hand, a quiet reassurance meant for her alone, and guided her toward the bank of regular elevators. The girl kept her eyes on Ava as she walked away. There was no anger in her gaze, only a puzzled sort of searching, as if she were trying to fit this woman into some category her 7-year-old mind already had. "Dad," she whispered, when they were a few steps from the gate, her voice soft enough that it was not meant to carry. "Did we do something wrong?" Ava heard it anyway. The question landed between her shoulder blades and stayed there. The man Parker bent down a little, but did not stop walking. "No, Soph," he murmured. "You did nothing wrong." His tone stayed light. His eyes reflected for a second in the chrome of the elevator doors were not. Behind the reception desk, one of the women leaned toward her co-worker. "She is rough on him every morning," she said under her breath. "I would have quit by now if I were him." "Keep your voice down," the other whispered back. Ava did not move. The words reached her cleanly. For a heartbeat, something shifted in her expression, a small change around the eyes, the barest pause in her breath. Then her shoulders lifted, straightened. The line of her mouth returned to what everyone in the building recognized as neutral. "Good morning, Ms. Sterling," the security guard said as she approached the private elevator. "Morning, Carl," she replied. She placed her badge against the reader. The light turned green with a muted beep. Behind her, the larger elevator swallowed Liam Parker and his daughter, its doors closing on the little girl's pale hair and purple coat. Inside the executive elevator, the walls were dark wood and brushed metal. The space smelled faintly of citrus cleaner. She watched the floor numbers climb. She saw her reflection broken into thin strips in the metal trim, the cut of her suit, the knot of her hair, the small bulge in her coat pocket where her phone rested vibrating with emails that had started before dawn. For a moment, the image of the little girl in the lobby overlaid her own reflection. The too large backpack, the star charm on the zipper, the question soft and bewildered. Did we do something wrong? The elevator chimed. The doors parted onto the executive floor, all glass partitions and framed patents on the walls. Ava stepped out the heels of her shoes, hitting the hallway in that same measured rhythm. By the time she reached her office, the scene in the lobby had been folded into the same mental drawer as traffic delays and quarterly projections. Her assistant stood as she approached. "Your 9 o'clock moved to 9:30, he said. "Richard Cole's office called. He wants an update on market chatter." Ava nodded. "Send me the latest numbers," she said. "And tell legal I want language ready for a defensive position." "Already on your desktop," he replied. he replied. She stepped into her office. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city gray and shining under the light rain. Pausing at the glass, she watched the street far below as a small shape in a yellow raincoat crossed between cars running to catch up to a taller figure under a shared umbrella. Sophie, she thought, then pushed the name away like a notification she had no time to open. In the reflection on the window, she could still see her own face calm and composed, and the thin strip of her watch at her wrist, counting seconds with mechanical patience. By late morning, the 14th floor had settled into its usual low hum. Screens glowed in rows, hands whispered inside machines, and the faint scent of burnt coffee hung around the kitchenette. Liam shrugged off his still damp coat and hung it on the back of his chair. His desk sat near the window, close enough that he could see the blurred outline of the bay through streaks of rain. Sophie had claimed the small couch in the corner of the IT common area. Her backpack lay open beside her, a spiral notebook on her knees, colored pencils in a neat line at her feet. He crouched in front of her. "You good here?" he asked. She nodded, serious. "I have math and then reading," she said. "Mrs. Nguyen put a sticky note on the page I have to do." He glanced at the page. Addition problems marched in uneven rows. "If you need anything, you can come get me," he said. "But remember, you are a ninja, quiet and invisible." Sophie grinned. "Ninja," she repeated and mimed, zipping her lips. Liam straightened and returned to his desk as a meeting reminder flashed on his screen. Conference Room B, System Architecture, Sync. Attendees, Ava Sterling, IT leads. He checked the clock, then opened the folder with his report. He had worked on it the night before after Sophie went to bed, trimming paragraphs, tightening charts, cutting anything that looked like excess. 15 minutes later, he sat at the polished table in Conference Room B with 3 other team leads. The large display on the wall mirrored his slides. Ava entered, last tablet in hand, and took the chair at the head of the table. "Walk me through it," she said. Her tone implied he was already behind. Liam clicked to the first slide and began. System load graphs, projected storage needs, risks if they postponed a hardware upgrade into the next quarter. He kept it to headlines and visuals, exactly what she had said she preferred. By the time he reached the end, her tablet screen had gone dark. "So you took out detail," she said. "You asked for high level last time," he replied. "I asked for useful," she said. "This is thin. I do not see the underlying assumptions. I cannot sell a plan to the board if I cannot test it myself." He resisted the urge to exhale. The other leads stared at their notepads. "I can add an appendix with the modeling," he said. "You can rebuild it," she answered. "Send it to me before end of day." "Yes, Ms. Sterling?" The meeting continued, her questions moving down the line. Someone else stumbled over a metric. Another tried a joke that fell flat. She did not raise her voice, but by the time she left the room, tension trailed behind her like a temperature drop. After lunch, there was another review, this time about a security patch that had not rolled out as cleanly as planned. "The incident report reads like a novel, Parker," she said from the doorway of his cube, holding a printout with a red sticky note on the front. 40 pages for a 12-minute outage. "We were tracing the root cause. I thought you would want the full picture," he said. "I want clarity, not clutter. I can condense it. You can learn to balance comprehensiveness and concision. There is a difference between thorough and indulgent." He swallowed back the comment that came to mind. For a moment, his eyes flicked past her to the common area. Sophie sat curled up in the corner, earbuds and pencil moving across paper. Her feet swung just above the floor. A Tupperware container with apple slices rested on the cushion beside her. Ava followed his gaze. "And this," she said, her voice cooling further, "this is not a solution." "She is doing homework," he said. "The after-school program closed. I do not have anyone else this week. This is a technology firm, Mr. Parker. She is quiet. She does not bother anyone. I asked the team." Ava looked back at Sophie. The girl had not noticed she was being discussed. She was shading the edge of a balloon in her drawing tongue, peeking out at the corner of her mouth in concentration. A small crease appeared on Ava's forehead. "This is not a daycare," she said. "Find another arrangement." Liam felt heat rise in his chest. "I am doing the best I can," he said. "Then do better." Her gaze lingered a second longer on the sight of the little girl on the couch, backpack open, like a camp pitched in enemy territory. Then she turned and walked away. That evening, the office emptied out in stages. Screens went dark. Elevators sighed. Liam finished the last revision on his architecture report, hit send, and shut down his computer. When he glanced toward the corner, he realized Sophie had fallen asleep on the couch, her cheek pressed against her math book, her pencil still in her hand. The colored pencils had rolled onto the floor, one under the coffee table, another near the trash can. He approached quietly and knelt beside her. "Hey, Ninja," he whispered. "Time to head home." Her eyes blinked open slowly. "Did I mess up?" she asked, voice thick with sleep. "No," he said. "You were perfect." Ms. Sterling looked mad. "Ms. Sterling always looks like that," he said, trying to brush off the sting. Sophie did not smile. She sat up and began to gather her things. A sheet tore loose from her notebook and slid to the floor. He reached for it. "Wait," she said. "That one is for me." She hugged it to her chest as they rode the elevator down. In the car, with the rain tapping on the windshield and the heater humming, she worked on it again, tongue between her teeth, eraser smudging the edges. "Who are you drawing?" he asked when she stopped at a red light. "You will see," she said. At home in their small apartment above a nail salon, she spread markers across the kitchen table and kept drawing while he cooked, while the news murmured from the living room, while the timer on the oven beeped. He glimpsed pieces of it in passing, a tall figure, a long coat, a crown that hovered above a head not quite touching. The next morning, the rain had softened to a mist that coated everything in a fine, cold sheen. Liam double-checked Sophie's backpack, his own laptop bag, and his phone. Sophie folded her drawing carefully, corners lined up as neatly as she could manage, and slipped it into the front pocket of her backpack. "Be careful with it," she said, as if he were the one prone to losing things. "I will try not to sit on it," he answered, and she rolled her eyes. This time, when they reached Sterling Tower, they did not go straight to the turnstiles. Liam hesitated near the security desk, looking at the row of elevators. His eyes drifted to the far left, where the private one sat, recessed, its brushed metal doors closed. "Are you sure about this?" he asked Sophie. She nodded, chin firm. "Dad, you said I should say thank you when grown-ups do things for me." "I did." "Ms. Sterling lets you work here, so I should say thank you." "It is not exactly charity," he said. Sophie frowned. "You said she can fire people." He almost laughed. "That is technically true." "Then I want to thank her," Sophie said. He tried to picture Ava's face when confronted with his 7-year-old daughter on the executive floor. The image was not comforting. "All right," he said finally. "We will go up before I head to my desk. One try. If she is in a meeting, we leave." Sophie accepted the terms as if they were part of a serious mission. Carl at security raised an eyebrow when Liam asked for temporary access to the executive floor. "Big shot today, Parker?" he asked. "Not exactly," Liam said. "Just trying to raise a polite kid." Carl smiled at Sophie and tapped a few keys. "Go on up," he said. "Try not to scare the suits." In the executive corridor, everything seemed quieter, the carpet thicker, the glass doors heavier. Sophie's sneakers made almost no sound. Liam's heart felt much louder. They stopped outside Ava's office. Through the glass wall, he could see her at her desk, head bent over her laptop, one hand pressed against her temple. A stack of printed reports sat to her right, a half-full cup of black coffee to her left. "Maybe this is a bad idea," he whispered. Before he could steer Sophie away, she knocked 3 small taps on the glass. Ava looked up. Her brows drew together when she saw them. She tapped her keyboard, and the door unlocked with a click. "Yes," she said. Her eyes moved first to Liam, then down to Sophie, who stepped forward until she stood in the doorway, with both hands clasped around the folded paper. "This is for you," Sophie said. Ava stared at the paper, as if it were a live animal. "What is it?" she asked. "A thank you," Sophie said, "for letting my dad work here." Liam opened his mouth to explain, to smooth, to apologize. No words came. Ava's gaze shifted from Sophie's face to the faint bulge of the folded sheet. For a second, her jaw tightened. Then she exhaled. "You did not have to do that," she said. "I wanted to," Sophie answered. There was no wobble in her voice, only a simple certainty. Ava extended her hand. Sophie placed the drawing on her palm as gently as if it were made of glass. "Thank you," Ava said, the words sounding unfamiliar in that register. She set the paper on the desk without opening it. "Now you both have somewhere to be," she added, the familiar coolness sliding back into place. "Mr. Parker, your stand-up started 5 minutes ago." "Right," he said. "Come on, Soph." Sophie gave Ava one last hopeful look, then followed her father out. In the hallway, Liam let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. "It is okay if she does not like it," Sophie said quietly. "I like it." He rested a hand on her head for a second. "I am sure she will look at it," he said. Several hours later, on his way to a meeting with infrastructure, Liam passed by the open slice of Ava's door. He did not mean to look in, but his eye caught on a splash of color on her desk. The drawing lay unfolded in the center of the blotter, smoothed flat. Crayon lines stood out against the white paper. A tall woman in a long coat, hair like dark waves, stood beneath a gray sky. Above her head floated a crooked crown tipped slightly to one side. At her feet, rain fell in straight blue lines, but never touched her. In the corner, a small girl in a bright yellow coat smiled up at her. Ava sat very still, her hands resting on the edge of the desk, her expression unreadable. Something in her face had softened, as if the hard angles had blurred. She must have sensed his presence. Her head lifted, her eyes cutting toward the doorway. Whatever had been there vanished behind a familiar smoothness. "Do you not have work to do, Mr. Parker?" she asked. "Yes," he said. He moved on, but what stayed with him was not her voice. It was the way she had been looking at a child's drawing, as if it had found a seam in armor she had forgotten could crack. The next day the rain came harder. By noon, the windows along the 14th floor were streaked so heavily that the bay had vanished behind a gray curtain. Fluorescent lights hummed. Someone in the corner microwaved leftover curry, the smell drifting into the hallway. Liam sat at his desk and rubbed his thumb over the worn strap of his watch. The rubber had begun to crack months ago, faint white lines crawling toward the holes. Every morning he thought he should replace it. Every week something else came first. New sneakers for Sophie when she tripped on the playground and tore the old ones. A field trip fee that had not been on the calendar. A higher power bill after a cold snap. He slipped the watch off his wrist and turned it in his hand. The face was scratched, but the numbers still showed clearly. The back was dented in one corner, where he had dropped it on concrete years before. He could still hear his mother's voice when she had given it to him on his 18th birthday in their small kitchen in Tacoma. She had pushed the box across the table, pretending it was nothing. "So you stop asking strangers for the time?" she had said, trying and failing to hide her smile. He had worn it through college hospital waiting rooms, job interviews, through her chemo appointments, through the quiet drive home after the last one. A thin line of rubber along the edge peeled away under his thumb. He sighed, stood, and headed for the kitchenette. Maybe there was tape. Maybe there was a miracle. The kitchenette held a refrigerator that hummed louder than it should, a coffee machine that had been cleaned properly, only when someone new was hired, and a drawer full of mismatched plastic forks. Liam opened a cupboard and rummaged for the duct tape he was almost sure he had seen someone use on a laptop charger last week. His watch balanced on the edge of the counter face down. As he reached into the back of the cupboard, his elbow nudged it. The strap finally gave up. The watch slid, hit the counter, bounced off the side, and landed on the tile with a sharp clack. The back popped off and spun away, skidding under the table. A small metallic piece rolled in a slow circle and stopped. "Perfect," he muttered. He crouched and reached under the table, fingers feeling for the smooth circle of the cover. A pair of black heels appeared at the edge of his vision. He closed his hand around the watch back and straightened. Ava stood in the doorway, one hand on the frame, her tablet against her hip. She had taken her coat off. Her blouse was crisp, her hair gathered at the nape of her neck. Her eyes flicked to the floor, then to the cracked strap still on the counter. For a heartbeat, something like alarm crossed her face. "That is barely holding together," she said. Liam pushed a hand through his hair, embarrassed at being caught scrambling on the floor. "It has held this long," he said. "Guess it finally picked a dramatic exit." One corner of her mouth twitched, as if the beginning of a smile had tried to form and thought better of it. "You should replace it," she said. "It still works." "That is not the point." For an instant the room seemed to narrow. She saw not the watch on his palm, but another one years ago. A cheap metal band on a carpenter's wrist catching sunlight through a cafe window as he reached for her hand. The faint imprint of sawdust under his nails. The way her father had looked at that watch, then at her, and smiled in a way that had not reached his eyes. "You can tell what matters to a man by what he chooses to wear every day, Ava," he had said. "It is not the price. It is the story he wants you to read. Learn to read it before it is too late." The memory snapped shut like a door. She pulled her gaze back to Liam's face. "Things that look like they are barely holding on have a tendency to fail when you most need them," she said. Her voice had gone flat again. The moment of something else was gone. She turned away, heels tapping once on the tile, then softening as she stepped back into the carpeted hallway. Liam watched her go, then looked down at the watch in his hand. The bare, round face looked smaller without its strap. He found tape in the bottom drawer, the gray kind meant for cables. It was an ugly solution, but he wrapped it around the strap and buckle anyway, smoothing it tight, buying the watch a little more time. In the open work area, the day pressed on. Tickets moved through queues. Messages blinked on screens. People rotated between chairs and the coffee machine in small, regular migrations. Near the machine, two senior engineers hovered with paper cups in hand. One of them, Mark, jabbed at something on his phone. The other, Greg, leaned his hip against the counter. So, did you see that ancient laptop bag of Parker's? Mark said. I swear I had the same model in college, in 2005. Greg snorted. I saw his wallet when he paid for lunch last week, he said. Thing looks like it has survived 3 recessions and a small war. Single dad life, Mark answered, shaking sugar into his cup. Apparently it means you get to bring your kid to work and still skip out early. Company must feel sorry for him, Greg said. He plays the devoted father card well. People eat that up. Mark took a sip of coffee. Yeah, he said. Meanwhile, the rest of us who do not parade our personal lives around get labeled unavailable. They both chuckled. Maybe we should start bringing props, Greg added. Borrow a neighbor's kid, tape some crayon drawings to our cubes, see if we can score some sympathy comp time. A voice spoke from behind them. That is enough. Both men froze. The sound had not been loud. It did not need to be. They turned slowly. Ava stood a few feet away, a plain white mug in her hand. The overhead light traced a hard line along her jaw. Ms. Sterling, Mark said, I heard what you were just doing, she said. She stepped forward, every motion controlled. Let me make something very clear, she continued. If either of you is so bored that you have time to dissect your colleague's personal circumstances instead of his work, then perhaps Sterling Dynamics is not a good fit for your skill set. Greg's face flushed. We did not mean anything by it, he said. We were kidding. Yes, she said. I am familiar with that excuse. Her gaze slid from one to the other. Liam Parker has taken more overnight calls this quarter than anyone else on your floor. He was here until 3 in the morning last week, fixing an outage that would have cost us millions if it had extended into market open. He has not missed a deadline. He has not complained. He does his job. She let the words sink in, then added quieter. The fact that he goes home to take care of his child does not reduce his value. It increases it in my estimation. I suggest you adjust yours. Silence swallowed the space between them. The coffee machine sputtered in the background, filling the empty noise. Yes, Ms. Sterling, Mark muttered. Understood, Greg said, eyes on the floor. If I hear this kind of talk again, she said, HR will receive notification from me. She shifted her mug to her other hand. Now get back to work. They scattered cups in hand, avoiding her eyes as they retreated to their desks. Ava stood alone for a moment by the counter. Her free hand hovered near the stack of stir sticks, fingers brushing the wood without picking one up. Her heart was beating faster than it should for such a short walk. She took a slow breath, then another, willing her pulse back into line. The coffee in her mug had gone cold. At the far end of the room, Liam stood near the printer, a stack of documents forgotten in his hand. He had walked in halfway through the exchange and stayed where he was, unsure whether to announce his presence or back away quietly. He watched as she lifted the mug to her lips, realized it was cold, and set it down without drinking. For a brief second, her shoulders slumped, the held tension slipping. Then she straightened again and turned her mask back in place. Her gaze met his across the room. There was no way she could have missed him. He braced for the flicker of annoyance he had come to expect when she found him in the wrong place at the wrong time. It did not come. Her eyes held his for a breath unreadable, then moved on. She walked past him without comment, the scent of her perfume lingering faintly in the air. That night, the rain turned from steady to relentless. It hammered the windows of Liam's apartment, a constant drumming behind the soft sounds of the cartoon Sophie watched before bed. He stood at the kitchen counter drying dishes, the overhead light casting a yellow pool on chipped laminate. The watch lay on the counter beside the sink tape, gleaming dully where the strap had been mended. He could not get the scene at the coffee machine out of his head. The way her voice had changed, the way she had listed his overtime and his nights on call as if she had been keeping track. Most of her criticism he could shrug off. She was the CEO. Pushing was part of the job description. He did not expect praise. But stepping in like that, in front of people who were more her natural allies than he would ever be. He picked up the watch and turned it over in his hand. Everything okay? Sophie asked from the doorway. Her hair was damp from the bath, her pajamas a size too big, cuffs rolled once at the wrists. Yeah, he said, just thinking about work. A little. Ms. Sterling yelled at you again? She asked. He thought of Ava standing between him and the 2 seniors, redirecting the full weight of her precision at them. Not this time, he said. Sophie padded into the kitchen and climbed onto one of the stools. She glanced at the watch. Can we get a new one? She asked. One day, he said. This one still maybe one still works. She squinted at it. It looks tired, she said. He smiled despite himself. So do I, he replied. She reached out and placed a small hand over his. Maybe it just needs someone to be nice to it, she said. He looked at their hands, then at her face, earnest and certain. "Maybe," he said. In a glass and steel condo across the city, 20 floors up, Ava sat at her own kitchen island with a glass of wine untouched in front of her. Her blazer hung over the back of a chair. The only light came from under the cabinets, and from the city outside, a scattering of buildings through the rain. On the far end of the counter, Sophie's drawing rested beside her laptop. The crooked crown still hovered above the woman's head. The little girl in the yellow coat smiled up through the crayon rain. Ava traced the edge of the paper with one fingertip, not quite touching the lines. Her phone vibrated once with a message she did not check. Market alert, board chat. Her father's name in a notification bubble. She turned the screen face down. Her gaze moved from the drawing to the faint outline of her own reflection in the window. The glass showed a woman in a dark blouse, hair pulled back, expression composed. For a long moment, she sat between the two images, the one a child had sketched and the one the city would recognize. Then she reached for the watch lying beside the sink. The metal felt cold against her skin. She fastened it around her wrist, tightening the clasp until it pinched. Outside, the rain kept falling. Inside, the tick of the second hand was the only sound in the room. The call came close to midnight. Liam woke to the blue glow of his phone on the nightstand and the muffled roar of rain against the bedroom window. For a moment, he did not know what day it was. Then the ringtone registered. IT emergency line. He grabbed the phone. "Parker," he said, voice thick. Static crackled, then the night operator came through. "Critical issue on production," she said. "Traffic spiked. We are seeing corrupted financial records on the dashboard. Ava wants you in." He glanced at the red digits of the alarm clock, 11:47 p.m. Sophie slept in the next room, her small shape curled under a blanket printed with cartoon planets. He sat on the edge of the bed and scrubbed a hand over his face. "I will be there," he said. He called Mrs. Nguyen next door. She answered on the second ring, her accent a soft rasp. "You need me to sit with the little one," she said before he finished explaining. "I am so sorry," he said. "I know it is late." "I am awake anyway. My dramas do not watch themselves," she replied. "Go. I will knock when I come over." 5 minutes later, she stood in his doorway, wrapped in a thick cardigan, slippers shaped like rabbits on her feet. "You look like you lost a fight with a pillow," she told him. "Shoes, jacket, go." He smiled, grabbed his bag, and stepped out into the hallway. The air in the stairwell was cool and smelled faintly of dust and old paint. Outside, the rain had not let up. It soaked the street in a shine that reflected every traffic light and street lamp. His car's wipers fought to keep up. As he drove into downtown, the tires hissing on wet asphalt. Sterling Tower rose ahead, its glass sides streaked its logo, glowing faintly under the clouds. Inside the lobby, lights were dimmed to half. The daytime crowd was gone. Only Carl at the security desk remained, shoulders hunched over a crossword. "Rough hour, Parker," Carl said as he scanned Liam's badge. "Server trouble." "When is it ever anything else?" Liam answered. He took the elevator up to the server floor. The usual buzz of voices was gone. The hum of machines was louder in the empty building. He pushed open the heavy door to the main server room. Cold air hit him first, recycled and dry. Rows of black racks lined the space. LEDs blinking cables like vines. The glow from the screens painted everything in blue and green. Ava stood near one of the central consoles. Her blazer was draped over a chair. She wore a pale shirt with the sleeves rolled up, the first two buttons undone. A strand of hair had come loose, falling against her cheek. The polished shine that followed her in the daytime was thinner now, traded for something rawer. "Liam," she said, "you are here." It was not a question. He dropped his bag by the console and logged into the terminal. "What have we got?" he asked. "The transaction system froze for 8 minutes," she said. "Some records corrupted during recovery. Finance is having a collective heart attack." He pulled up logs, scrolling through lines of timestamps and error codes. A pattern emerged, threads of cause and effect, knitting together under his hands. "Looks like a cache bug interacting with the new reporting module," he said. "We can isolate the bad records, roll a hotfix, and rebuild the affected batches." "How long?" she asked. "If nothing else surprises me," he said, 2 hours. Her jaw flexed. "Faster is better," she said. "The board meeting is at 10. If I walk in there with cooked numbers, Richard will have his opening." He did not ask what opening she meant. He had heard enough hallway gossip to connect names with tension. He settled into the chair, fingers moving over the keys. The noise of the server fans filled the silence between them. Minutes blurred. He switched between windows, traced dependencies, typed commands. His focus narrowed until there was nothing but code and memory addresses. At some point, Ava moved to the far console, her own laptop open. She pulled up real-time reports, cross-checking numbers, answering messages with clipped replies. The light from the screens painted shadows under her eyes. An hour passed, then another. Around 1:30, Liam's stomach made itself known with a low growl. He ignored it. His shoulders ached from hunching forward. The tape strap of his watch scratched faintly against his skin. "When did you last eat?" Ava asked. He blinked, surprised by the question. Her voice held no judgment this time, only an odd kind of focus. "At dinner," he said. "So, 6. 6 this evening?" she asked. "6 yesterday," he corrected. She exhaled slowly. "You are no use if you fall over," she said. Before he could protest, she closed her laptop and walked out of the room. He heard the door seal behind her, then nothing but the constant breath of the machines. He kept working. 10 minutes later, the door swung open again. Ava returned with a plastic-wrapped sandwich and a bottle of water, both from the executive lounge upstairs. She placed them beside his keyboard. "Eat," she said. "That is an order." He glanced at the sandwich. "Careful," he said. "Someone might think you are human." Her eyes flickered, not quite a smile, not quite annoyance. "One of us should be functioning," she said. "Might as well be you." He unwrapped the sandwich, the smell of turkey and mustard cutting through the cold air, and took a bite. The food hit his stomach with a thud of relief. As he ate, he watched her from the corner of his eye. She had gone back to the console, shoulders straight, hands moving over the keyboard. Every so often she pressed her fingers to her temple as if her skull hurt. "How long have you been here?" he asked. "Since 7, she said. "In the evening?" "In the morning." He frowned. "You went home at all?" She did not answer. The silence was answer enough. He finished the sandwich, wiped his hands on the napkin, and returned both hands to the keys. The patch compiled the log started to show clean runs. The number of corrupted entries stopped increasing. By a little after 2, the worst was contained. The transactions would need careful reconciliation, but the bleeding had stopped. Liam pushed back from the console and rolled his neck. "All right," he said. "We are stable. I will write up the incident report in the morning and start planning a more permanent fix." Ava did not respond. He turned. She was still standing, but her knuckles were white where her hand gripped the back of a chair. Her face had gone a shade paler, the skin around her eyes tight. "Ava," he said. "I am fine," she said. She took a step and swayed the room, tilting around her. He moved without thinking. His hands caught her arm, steadying her before she could list into the row of equipment. She ended up closer to him than they had ever stood. Her shoulder brushed his chest. He could feel the quick rise and fall of her breath. For a moment, neither of them spoke. He caught a trace of her perfume under the dry tang of recycled air, something faintly floral and expensive. The second hand on his watch ticked against her sleeve where his wrist touched her. "I did not mean to," she said, words low, not quite steady. "Almost passing out is not usually on purpose," he replied. Her mouth tightened, as if she wanted to argue the point by default. Then she stopped the fight going out of her. "I have not slept properly in 3 days," she said. "The board has been circling. There are rumors about a hostile bid. Cole keeps calling for more oversight, more controls, more everything." "You do not have to explain," he said. "No," she said. "I suppose I do not." He eased his grip, giving her room to step back. Her cheeks held a thin flush now, whether from embarrassment or the heat of the server room, he could not tell. "You should go home," he said. "Get at least a few hours before you have to impress a room full of people who already made up their minds." A corner of her mouth lifted humor without warmth. "You sound like you have been in those rooms," she said. "From the back wall," he said, "fixing projectors." She nodded once. "Thank you, Liam," she said. The way she said his name caught him off guard. No title, no distance, just the syllables as if she had decided they were easier to carry without extra edges. "You are welcome," he said. She gathered her blazer and laptop movements slower than usual and left the room. He watched the door close behind her, then picked up his bag. When he stepped out into the lobby, the rain outside had softened to a mist, but the city still looked blurred, as if sleep would not come easily there either. By 10 that morning, the boardroom on the top floor was full. The table was polished wood long enough to seat a dozen with space to spare. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed the skyline fading into gray. A tray of untouched pastries sat near the coffee service. Ava stood at the head of the table, remote in hand. The first slide showed Sterling Dynamics' logo over a curve of upward lines. She wore a charcoal suit, hair pinned back, every detail precise. Only the faint smudges under her eyes betrayed the night. "Year over year, revenue is up 12%, she said. We expanded into 2 new verticals, increased our R&D allocation, and retained key enterprise clients despite market volatility. She clicked through charts, her voice steady. Around the table, board members murmured some scribbling notes, some watching her over steepled fingers. Richard Cole leaned back in his chair. His suit was a shade lighter than the others, his tie a subtle pattern that cost more than some people's rent. He tapped his pen against the tabletop. "The numbers are solid," he said when she paused. "No one is disputing that." A few faces turned toward him. "What concerns me," he continued, "is not the last 4 quarters. It is the next 8. We need stability and leadership to weather what is coming. We cannot afford volatility at the top." "Is there something specific you would like to address, Richard?" Ava asked. He spread his hands. "There are whispers," he said, "market chatter, questions about whether decisions here are driven by data or by emotion." The word hung in the air. "Emotion has nothing to do with strategic decisions," she said. "Does it not?" he asked. "You have been seen intervening in minor HR matters, inserting yourself into petty office squabbles. That is not the role of a CEO. Investors notice when a leader appears distracted." She felt the back of her neck prickle. "Protecting a productive employee from harassment is not a distraction," she said. "To you," he said. "To the street it may look different." At the far end of the room near the wall, Liam stood by the AV rack. He had come in earlier to make sure the projector would not flicker mid-slide. Now he stood with his hands behind his back, trying to be invisible. He watched Richard's face, the small twist of his mouth, the way he enjoyed the edge in his own voice. "So, perhaps," Richard said, "we should be honest with ourselves. Numbers are one thing, optics are another. A leader perceived as unstable, over-involved, emotional can hurt this company as much as a downturn." The word repeated sharper this time. Emotional. The room went quiet. Several board members looked away uncomfortable. Ava's throat felt tight for a second. She forced the muscles to relax. "With respect," a voice said from the back of the room, "that is not accurate." Heads turned. Liam stepped away from the wall, a remote still in his hand from the projector test. His tie was slightly crooked. His badge hung at his belt. He did not look like someone who belonged in this room, which made the fact that he was speaking there more noticeable. "Ms. Sterling increased revenue 12% in a year that saw competitors lose ground," he said. "She opened 2 new lines of business and pushed a modernization plan that took guts when it would have been easier to coast." Richard's brows rose. "And you are," he asked, "Liam Parker," he said, "infrastructure. And you feel qualified to weigh in on leadership?" Richard asked, amusement edging his words. "I feel qualified to read the results," Liam said. "If this is what you call instability, I would be curious to see what stable leadership looks like." A couple of board members hid smiles behind their hands. "This is a closed discussion," Richard said. "Staff should not interrupt." "I apologize," Liam said. The projector needed a human in the room in case it decided to be emotional. A brief ripple of laughter broke the tension, then died as people remembered themselves. Ava did not laugh. She watched Liam, her expression unreadable, something hot and cold moving in her chest at once. "That will be all, Mr. Parker," she said. "Yes, Ms. Sterling." "Sterling," he replied. He stepped back to the wall, but did not leave. No one told him to go, and he did not volunteer. He remained there while the conversation shifted back to ratios and forecasts, but the current under it had changed. When the meeting finally ended, chairs scraped back and people filed out in low clusters. Richard lingered only long enough to give Ava a thin smile that did not reach his eyes, then left with his phone already at his ear. Liam closed the AV cabinet, coiled the last cable, and turned toward the door. "Mr. Parker," Ava said behind him. He stopped. "Yes," he said. "Walk with me," she said. It was not inflection he had heard from her before. Not a command, not quite a request. Something in between. He fell into step beside her as she moved past the elevators and toward a stairwell he had never used. They climbed in silence, the echo of their footsteps bouncing off concrete walls. At the top, she pushed open a metal door. Cool air washed over them. The rooftop garden was a rectangle of planters and benches ringed by a low glass barrier. Small trees, their leaves turned copper and red, shivered in the breeze. Beyond the edge, the city spread out in layered gray. The rain had eased to a fine mist that beaded on the railing. Ava walked to the center and stopped. She did not face him. She watched the skyline instead, hands in her coat pockets. "This will not take long," she said. He waited. "When I was 24, she began, I fell in love with a man who built tables." He blinked, taken aback by the opening. Evan worked in a small shop in Ballard, she said. He smelled like sawdust and coffee. He did not have a degree. He had calluses. He had nothing my father would count as valuable. She let out a breath that smoked faintly in the cold air. I was supposed to be learning the family business. I spent my evenings in a workshop watching him sand wood. I thought that made me brave. She remembered the way Evan's hands had moved over a plank, the way he had listened when she talked about earnings calls, even if he did not understand all the terms. The way he had worn that cheap watch with the dented band, the one her father had dismissed with a glance. Eventually my father found out, she said. Charles Sterling does not like surprises. He hired Evan, paid him to share anything I told him. Strategy, plans. It was a test, he said. Liam felt his stomach tighten. Evan took the money, she said. He handed over everything. My father exposed it at a family dinner like a magic trick. Look, Ava, see how easy it is to buy loyalty. Be grateful I did this before you made a real mistake. Her voice did not crack, but her hands curled into fists in her pockets. He told me vulnerability is a liability, she said. That love makes you stupid. That if I wanted to sit in his chair someday, I had to choose between being his daughter and being his successor. She turned her head slightly enough that he could see the outline of her profile, the hard set of her mouth. So, I learned, she said, I learned to read watches and shoes and words people choose. I learned to assume the worst and be pleasantly surprised when I was wrong. It is efficient. It hurts less if you are never surprised at all. The mist gathered on her lashes. She blinked it away. When you walked into my lobby with your tape strap and your kid in a raincoat, she said, you looked exactly like the kind of risk my father would laugh at. He stayed very still. And every time you looked at that child, she continued, I saw the thing I told myself I could never afford. There is a part of me that still thinks that. A louder part looks at my balance sheet and says, I made the right choice. She fell quiet. But then you stand up in a room full of people who outrank you and correct a man like Richard without blinking, she said. I do not know what to do with that. He let the quiet stretch for a few seconds before he spoke. That was not about courage, he said. That was about numbers. Her shoulder lifted a faint shrug. Numbers are the only language some of them understand, she said. You spoke it well. He stepped closer to the railing, leaving a respectful space between them. What your father did was not a test of your strength, he said. It was a test of how far he could push you. She did not answer. The set of her jaw shifted. I am not Evan, he said. I am also not an investor who thinks they own you because they own stock. I fix servers. I read bedtime stories. I try not to break things I cannot repair. A small huff of air left her not quite a laugh. That is an enviable skill, she said. They stood side by side, the city spread out below the mist settling on their coats. You have been carrying that story alone for a long time, he said. It is mine, she said. I did not see the point of sharing it. Maybe there is no point, he said. Maybe it just weighs less when someone else knows how heavy it is. She looked at him, then fully her eyes dark and bright at once. For a second the edges of her control softened, and he saw the tiredness and the hurt she kept tucked away behind numbers and charts. A single drop of water ran from a strand of her hair down along her cheek. It might have been rain, it might not. She turned back to the skyline. You should get some sleep before your next shift as projector whisperer, she said. He hesitated, then nodded. If you need anything else with the systems before the board chews on you again, call, he said. I always do, she replied. He left her there in the garden, among the red leaves and low shrubs, the mist hanging between her and the city. The drawing of a woman under rain with a crown above her head, not so far from the real thing. The next morning the rain had shifted from a hard sheet to a steady drizzle. The city looked washed out, streetlights still glowing, even though the sky claimed it was day. Liam walked into the lobby with Sophie at his side, her small hand warm in his. She wore her yellow raincoat again, hood down, curls escaping around her ears. Her backpack bumped against his leg with each step. He felt the familiar tightening in his shoulders as they crossed the marble floor. Habit, expectation. He scanned the space almost automatically for a flash of dark hair and a tailored coat. Ava stepped through the security gates at that moment, tablet under one arm. Her hair was pinned up, a few strands loose at her neck. She spoke briefly to Carl, then turned in their direction. Liam braced. Sophie's grip on his hand tightened. Ava's gaze landed on them. For a fraction of a second, her expression flickered through something like surprise, then settled. Good morning, Mr. Parker, she said. Just that. No comment about the rain. No pointed mention of daycares or professionalism. Liam blinked. "Good morning, Mrs. Sterling," he replied. Her eyes dropped to Sophie. "Good morning, Sophie," she added. Sophie stared up at her, caught off guard. "Morning," she said. Then Ava moved past them, heels crisp on marble, and stepped into the private elevator. The door slid shut with a quiet hiss. Liam exhaled slowly. Sophie looked up at him. "She said my name," she whispered. "She remembered it," he said. "Does that mean she likes me now?" Sophie asked. "I do not know if it works that fast," he replied. They swiped in and took the regular elevator to the 14th floor. The weekly IT stand-up happened at 9 on Wednesdays. A handful of engineers clustered around the end of a long table in the glass-walled conference room, laptops, open coffee cups lined up like small barricades. Ava attended often enough that people always came prepared. She did not sit. She stood at the far end of the table, tablet in hand, scanning faces with the kind of focus that made people straighten their spines. Liam ran through his updates. He kept it tight. Overnight patch status, follow-up from the late-night crash, a brief mention of upcoming capacity planning. He waited for the interruption that usually came somewhere around his second bullet point, the correction, the demand for more detail or less for something different from what he had prepared. It never came. Ava watched him, her face serious but not hostile, if that word could be applied to her at all. When he finished, she nodded once. "Thank you," she said. "Flag any unusual patterns in the traffic reports this week. Legal is jittery." "Will do," he answered. She moved on to the next lead. Someone else stumbled over a date range. She asked a follow-up question, sharp but contained. The meeting ended without anyone leaving looking like they needed a second coffee, just to recover. In the hallway afterward, two junior developers exchanged a look. "Did we enter a different timeline?" one whispered. She did not slice anyone open. "Shut up! She could still be in earshot," the other hissed, glancing around. In her office on the executive floor, Ava set her tablet on the desk and stared at the agenda for the rest of the day. Meetings, calls, a lunch she did not intend to eat. She should have felt relief that the servers had held through market open, that the corrupted records were contained. Instead, her thoughts kept sliding back to the rooftop, to the way Liam had looked at her when she said she had learned to assume the worst. She had not planned to tell him about Evan, or about her father. The words had come out like a spill once the first dam had cracked. Now they were out there existing somewhere other than inside her own head. She turned her chair toward the windows. The mist blurred the edges of the city. Somewhere below, 14 floors down, a little girl in a yellow raincoat sat on a couch with a notebook. Ava thought of the way Sophie had said the word "thank you" 2 mornings before. Not as payment or obligation, but as something she simply believed should be done. Her father would have told her to discourage that kind of openness. People who give without calculation lose. She turned back to her desk and picked up a report. The numbers did not hold still. Her eyes slid over them and found nothing. By afternoon, the tense hum on the 14th floor had shifted into something else. People still kept their heads down when Ava walked past, but there was a new kind of watching in their eyes, now curious as much as wary. Sophie was in the IT common area again, shoes off this time, socks patterned with stars. She had spread her math book, reading log, and a small container of crackers across the coffee table in front of the couch. Her backpack lay open on the floor, one strap twisted. Liam sat at his desk nearby, headset on, talking a product manager through the difference between a bug and a feature request. "You cannot just call it a feature because you do not want to admit it broke," he said. Then paused as the person on the other end protested. "No, that is not how this works, I promise. If the system behaves in a way that no one intended, that is a bug." A shadow fell across the table. Sophie looked up. Ava stood in the doorway, hand on the glass frame. She did not step inside. She stayed where she was, gaze taking in the open books, the small shoes on the floor, the way Sophie's pencil moved in careful strokes over a worksheet. For a moment, something tightened in her features, a reflexive reaction reaching for the familiar remarks. "This is not a living room. Children belong elsewhere. Rules exist for a reason." She did not say any of it. "Hi," Sophie said. The word hovered between greeting and question. Ava inclined her head. "Hello," she said. She let her eyes drop to the worksheet. "What are you working on?" she asked. "Math," Sophie said. "I have to do all the 2s. 2 times 3, 2 times 9. Then I have to circle the ones I did right." Her pencil hovered over a line. 2 times 8. She had written 19. Ava saw it instantly. The part of her brain that cataloged errors twitched. "You missed one," she said. Heat crept into Sophie's cheeks. "Which one?" she asked. Ava pointed a small gesture, nothing like the tapping finger she used on printed reports. "This," she said. 2 times 8 is 16. Sophie pressed her lips together, erased carefully, and wrote the new answer. "Thank you," she said. "You are welcome," Ava replied. She stepped back. Liam had turned in his chair, headset resting around his neck now. He watched the exchange with an expression he could not quite categorize. "Miss Sterling," he said. "Parker," she said with a slight nod. She left before the moment could stretch into awkwardness, disappearing down the hallway in a whisper of footsteps. Sophie swung her legs. "She helped me," she said. "I saw," Liam replied. "She is not just scary," Sophie said after a pause. Liam thought about that. "Maybe not," he said. Around 3, the sugar crash hour, the kitchenette filled up. Engineers and analysts leaned against counters holding mugs like lifelines. Someone rummaged through a communal drawer of snacks and surfaced with a half-crushed protein bar. Sophie appeared at the doorway with her notebook in hand. She had a question about a reading assignment and had attempted to find the answer in the break room. Liam pointed her back toward the couch after explaining the difference between fiction and non-fiction. On her way out, she almost collided with Maya from QA, who was carrying a fresh pot of coffee. "Sorry," Sophie said. "It is okay," Maya answered. "Watch out for the caffeine addicts, they cannot see straight." Maya glanced toward the corner, where Ava usually kept her mug of black coffee during her rare visits to the floor. "You know," she told Sophie in a conspiratorial tone, "Ms. Sterling drinks her coffee with nothing in it. No sugar, no cream, just bitterness." She laughed at her own joke, light and harmless as far as she meant it. Sophie absorbed the information as if it were serious. "She does not like sweet things?" Sophie asked. Maya shrugged. "Not that I have ever seen," she said. That thought sat with Sophie for the next hour. When Liam finally closed his last ticket and leaned back in his chair, stretching the kink from his neck, he found his daughter watching him with a particular look. "What is that face?" he asked. "You are plotting something." "Do you think Ms. B. Sterling likes sweet things?" Sophie said. Liam rubbed his eyes. "I have never seen her eat anything that was not a salad or almonds," he said. "She drinks her coffee black. That is usually a sign." "Of what?" Sophie asked. "Of someone who prefers bitter," he said. "Or of someone who is pretending," Sophie replied. He considered that. "What makes you say that?" he asked. She shrugged, but there was a spark in her eyes. "Sometimes people say they do not like something because they do not get it very much," she said. "Like when you said you did not need a birthday cake, but you were happy when Mrs. Nagin brought one anyway." "That is different," he said. "Is it?" she asked. He opened his mouth, then closed it. "I do not know if Ms. Sterling and I have the same relationship with sugar," he said. Sophie frowned thoughtfully. "I think she might like sweet things and just not remember," she said. He smiled. "That is a big project," he said, "reminding Ms. Sterling what she likes." Sophie slid off the couch and came to stand beside his chair. "You always tell me to say thank you with more than words," she said, "like when someone helps me or lets me do something." "I do," he said. "Then I should say thank you properly," she said. "For what?" he asked. "For her letting you work here," Sophie said, "even if she is mean sometimes." He hesitated, the automatic corrections forming in his mind. This job was not a favor. It was a contract. He had earned his place. It was not as simple as letting. Looking at his daughter, he swallowed the technicalities. "How are you going to do that?" he asked instead. Sophie tilted her head. "Do you think she would like a cupcake?" she said. A picture rose in his mind of Ava in her office, all glass and steel and careful control, confronted by a lopsided cupcake in a paper liner. He almost laughed. "I am not sure anyone in that office has ever seen a cupcake," he said. "Then it will be a surprise," Sophie replied. She said it with the calm conviction of someone who believed surprises were mostly good. Liam glanced at the clock, then at the rain outside, softened now to a fine curtain. "We would have to get up early," he said. "Stop by the bakery near home." "I can wake up early," she said. "I know you can," he answered. As they rode the elevator down that evening, Sophie leaned against his side, humming under her breath. The numbers above the doors ticked down. Liam watched their reflection in the brushed metal panel. His own face looked more tired than he liked. Sophie's eyes were bright, focused somewhere ahead. He thought of Ava's voice on the rooftop, the story of the man with sawdust on his hands, and the father who called love a liability. He thought of her at the coffee machine that morning, spine straight, cutting off cheap jokes at his expense. The cables hummed, the elevator slid to a stop. The doors opened onto the lobby with its gleaming floor and echoing space. Outside, the drizzle had thinned to a mist that felt almost gentle on his face when they stepped into it. Sophie lifted her chin into the damp air. "It smells clean," she said. He looked up at the low clouds, then down at her. "It does," he said. They walked toward the parking garage, their steps falling into an easy rhythm, the day's sharp edges smoothed, if only slightly, by the changing tone in the halls above. The bakery on the corner of Liam's block opened at 7. By 7:10, he and Sophie stood inside, the warmth and smell of sugar wrapping around them as the bell over the door jingled shut. The glass case held neat rows of cupcakes, cookies, and small cakes, all lined up like colorful chess pieces. Sophie pressed her palms lightly to the glass. "Look at that one," she whispered. "It has sprinkles that look like stars." Her breath fogged a circle on the display. Liam checked his watch. They had less cushion than he would have liked, but not so little that he could drag her away. "Pick one," he said. "Only one. Remember what we talked about. This is a thank you, not a sugar bomb for your classmates." Sophie nodded, serious. "I know," she said. "It is from Ms. Sterling. It is from Ms. Sterling." She studied the case with the concentration she usually reserved for art projects. The clerk behind the counter waited patiently, tongs in hand. "She wears those serious clothes," Sophie said, more to herself than to him. "Black and gray and white. She needs something colorful." Her finger hovered over a cupcake with bright blue frosting, then moved on. After a moment, she pointed. "That one," she said. "The chocolate one with the pink on top." The cupcake she chose had a swirl of pale pink frosting piped high and a small sugar pearl set at the peak. The chocolate underneath looked dark and rich. The clerk lifted it out and placed it carefully in a small white box. "For here or to go?" she asked. "To go," Sophie said. "It is a present." The clerk smiled and folded the lid, then slid the box into a paper bag. On the ride downtown, Sophie held the bag on her lap with both hands, as if it contained something fragile and valuable. Every time Liam took a sharper turn, she tightened her grip. "You do not have to squeeze it," he said. "You might squish it that way." "I am protecting it from gravity," she replied. He laughed. "That is not exactly how that works," he said. She kept her eyes on the bag. "It is important," she said. The rain had eased to a fine mist again, hanging in the air like a veil. When they walked into Sterling Tower, the marble floor shone, reflecting their feet back at them in small glimpses. Carl glanced at the paper bag. "Smuggling contraband, Sophie?" he asked. "It is a cupcake," she said. "For Ms. Sterling." Carl whistled softly. "Brave move," he said. "Good luck." They swiped in and headed for the bank of elevators. Liam hesitated for a fraction of a second, then pressed the button for the executive floor instead of the 14th. "You sure you are ready for this?" he asked. Sophie nodded. The bag crinkled faintly in her hands. "I am not scared," she said. "If she does not like it, I can eat it." The elevator ride felt longer than usual. The numbers ticked up each chime, a reminder that he was voluntarily walking into his CEO's space before 8:30 in the morning, with his 7-year-old leading the way. The doors opened onto the quieter, carpeted hallway. The air even smelled different up here, less like coffee and electronics, more like whatever subtle scent the building management used for important floors. A handful of assistants moved between offices carrying folders and phones. Voices were low, most conversations closer to murmurs than to speech. Ava's office door was open a few inches. Through the gap, Liam could see her at her desk reading something on her laptop. Light from the windows drew a pale outline around her. Sophie walked ahead, stopped at the door, and knocked with her knuckles. The sound was small but clear. Ava looked up. Her gaze went first to Liam, then shifted down. "Sophie," she said, "you are up early." "I had to go to the bakery," Sophie said. She held up the bag. "For you," she added. Ava's eyes dropped to the bag, then rose again. "For me," she repeated. "It is a thank you," Sophie said. "Dad says you work very hard, and also that you take all the scary meetings so he does not have to." "Did he?" Ava said, glancing at Liam. Color crept up his neck. "I might have said something like that," he admitted. Sophie stepped carefully into the office as if she were entering a museum. The space had the same minimalist precision as its occupant. Framed patents on one wall, a shelf with a few books arranged by size and color, a single plant near the window that somehow managed to look both alive and disciplined. Sophie set the bag on the desk and opened it. The white box inside had a faint grease stain at the bottom. She lifted the lid. The cupcake sat slightly off-center. The frosting tilted from the journey, the sugar pearl no longer perfectly placed. A small streak of pink had smeared against the cardboard wall. "I tried to keep it straight," Sophie said, "but cars are bumpy." "It survived remarkably well," Ava said. Her voice had softened the edges less sharp. Sophie looked up at her. "Dad says you do not like sweet things," she said, "but I think you do. I think maybe you forgot." Behind her in the outer office, the click of keyboards stilled. Glass carried sound better than people thought it did. Ava stared at the cupcake. For a moment she seemed at a loss. "I do not usually eat cake in the morning," she said. "You could save it," Sophie suggested, "for when you have a bad email." One side of Ava's mouth curved. "When not if," she said. "There are always bad emails," Sophie said with the certainty of someone who had heard enough of her father's muttered reactions to inbox alerts. "That is true," Ava said. She picked up the box, weighing its lightness, then set it back down. Her hand hovered over the cupcake, then withdrew. "You went to all this trouble," she said. "It would be rude to let it sit." She peeled back the paper liner with careful fingers and took a small bite. Sugar and chocolate and artificial strawberry flavoring hit her tongue. It was too sweet, of course it was. The frosting stuck to the roof of her mouth. The cake part was a little dry. She could not remember the last time she had eaten something like it. A sound bubbled up from somewhere low in her chest, rising before she could stop it. She laughed. Not the short, controlled huff she sometimes produced in boardrooms, the kind that did not disturb the air. This was warmer, rounder, startled. It changed her whole face. Fine lines that usually looked like they were carved into stone softened. Her eyes crinkled at the corners. The tightness around her mouth vanished. In the hallway outside, Maya from QA, on her way to deliver a report to an assistant, froze. Did she just, she whispered to no one in particular, laugh? An analyst at the nearest desk peeked over his monitor. "I thought that was a myth," he said. Inside the office, Sophie watched Ava with open fascination. "You like it," Sophie said. "It is very sweet," Ava replied. "That is the point," Sophie said. Ava took another slightly larger bite. The cupcake looked worse for wear now, frosting uneven crumbs on the edge of the box. "Thank you, Sophie," she said. "It is perfect." "You should smile more," Sophie said. "You look less like you were going to yell that way." "Sophie," Liam said, breathless with mortification. Ava's laugh came again, softer this time. "I will keep that in mind," she said. She set the box to one side, away from the laptop and the stack of reports. "I have 3 calls in 10 minutes, she said, "and a presentation that still needs one more revision. Mr. Parker, you are lingering." Liam started. "Right," he said. I did not want to interfere with your morning." "You already did," she said, but the words did not have their usual sting. "In a tolerable way." He watched her for another heartbeat, caught off guard by the version of her that the cupcake seemed to have called to the surface. "Come on, Ninja," he said to Sophie. "We have a floor to hold together." Sophie hopped off the chair she had quietly claimed and followed him out, giving Ava a small wave over her shoulder. "Bye," she said. "Goodbye," Ava replied. The door clicked shut. The outer office was too quiet. People stared down at their screens with exaggerated focus. As Liam and Sophie walked past, Maya caught his eye. "Did your kid just feed sugar to the dragon?" she asked under her breath. He shook his head, ignoring the nickname. "She was being polite," he said. "That looked like more than polite," Maya replied. "I am not sure the building knows how to handle shifted mood on the executive floor." On 14, the atmosphere felt slightly different when they arrived. News traveled faster than any patch. By mid-morning, at least 3 people had seen a photo someone had snapped through the glass of Ava holding a cupcake, her head tipped back in laughter. No one said anything to Liam outright. The glances spoke enough. He pretended not to notice and threw himself into the work. Tickets, messages, a baseline report that needed updating. The familiarity of the workflow grounded him. Just before lunch, he walked past the glass railing that overlooked the lobby. From this angle, he could see the edge of the executive level below part of Ava's office through the wall of glass. He paused. On her desk, among the clean lines and ordered piles, the little white box still sat open. The cupcake inside was reduced to crumbs and smears of frosting. Beside it, propped against the base of her monitor, was Sophie's drawing of the woman in the long coat with the hovering crown, and the rain that did not touch her. Liam felt something shift in his chest. A small movement, like the first crack in ice at the end of winter. He had been building walls around his own life for years. Different walls from Ava's, but walls all the same. Job, routine, homework, bedtime stories. The strict lines he kept between work and everything else were as much about safety as they were about survival. Watching Ava tilt her head back and laugh, because of a pink frosted cupcake his daughter had chosen, seeing that drawing on her desk, like it belonged there, pushed at those lines. Maya appeared at his elbow, carrying a stack of printouts. "You are in rare form," she said. "First she defends you in the kitchen. Now she eats your kid's baking bribery and smiles about it." "It was not bribery," he said. "It was gratitude." If that is what gratitude looks like now, I am going to start saying thank you a lot more, she said. He shook his head, but there was no real annoyance in it. Get back to work, he said. Yes, boss, she replied and moved on. That night, after Sophie fell asleep with her hair spread across the pillow and her stuffed bear tucked under her arm, Liam lay on the couch in the darkened living room. The only light came from the street lamp outside, leaking in around the edges of the blinds. His laptop sat open on the coffee table, an incident report half written on the screen. The words blurred as his thoughts drifted elsewhere. He saw again the way Ava's expression had changed in her office, the way her shoulders had loosened for once, the unexpected sound of her laughter low and surprised, the gentle way she had corrected Sophie's multiplication without making her feel small. He thought of her on the rooftop, telling him about Evan, about her father's test, about choosing to keep her heart armored because the alternative had seemed too dangerous. He had expected her to stay exactly as she had been on his first day in the building, cold, precise, the kind of person you built boundaries against without thinking. Instead, small cracks were appearing in that image light, pushing through in thin lines. He rubbed his hands over his face and let out a breath. "You are in trouble," he muttered into the quiet room. The ceiling did not disagree. He closed the laptop, sank deeper into the cushion, and stared at the faint pattern the streetlight drew over the wall. Somewhere between the rain, the rooftop, and a lopsided cupcake, something inside him had shifted. He did not know what to call it yet. The word that hovered unwelcome and insistent floated just out of reach. He suspected it would not stay out of reach for long. Sophie was warm before the alarm went off. Liam felt it when she crept into his bed at some point in the early morning, a small furnace wedging itself against his side. He had mumbled something about her own room and blankets, then fallen back asleep. At 7, the alarm buzzed. He reached to silence it and touched her forehead. Heat rolled under his palm. He sat up fast. "Hey," he said softly. "Sophie, open your eyes for Open eyes for me." She blinked at him, lids heavy. "My head hurts," she whispered. He grabbed the thermometer from the drawer, shook it once out of habit, and slid it under her tongue. When it beeped, he checked the numbers. 102. "Well," he said, "you win. You are officially too hot for school." She attempted a smile. "That sounds better than it feels," she said. He carried her back to her room, tucked her under the covers, and propped her up with pillows. The bear took its usual place at her side. He turned the small fan on low, even though the morning air outside the window was cold. "Do not move," he said. "Dr. Dad is on the case." "Is Dr. Dad allowed to call a real doctor?" she asked. "Dr. Dad absolutely plans to call a real doctor," he said. The pediatrician's office squeezed them in at 2:00. The receptionist on the phone sounded harried, but turned kind when she heard Sophie's age. "We have a gap at 2, she said. "If you can be here on time, we will see her." "We will be there," Liam said. He hung up and rubbed his face. He still had to go into the office. There was a set of patches scheduled for late morning that he was the best person to handle. He glanced toward the wall that separated the bedrooms from the living room, thinking of Mrs. Nguyen. 10 minutes later, he knocked on her door. She opened it in a sweatshirt with a faded logo and leggings, her gray hair pulled into a bun. "You need coverage," she said at once. "She has a fever," he said. "The earliest appointment is at 2. I have to go in for a bit this morning. I will be back by 1:15 if traffic behaves." "Traffic never behaves," she said. "Go. I will keep an eye on our astronaut." "Thank you," he said. "You can pay me in soup later," she replied, closing the door. He kissed Sophie's forehead, promised he would be back in time for the appointment, and left the apartment with his laptop bag slung over one shoulder. The weather was gray again, the kind that flattened everything into the same dull shade. By the time he slid into his chair on the 14th floor, his mind was already split. Half on tickets and logs, half on the clock. The planned network work started late, as these things always seem to. A minor issue in a secondary system turned into a chain of small problems that needed untangling. His inbox filled with quick questions that were anything but. At 1:15, he wrote a terse note in the team chat. "Gotta leave at 1:30, doctor appointment. If something explodes, call my cell. You know the drill." He finished the last change documented enough to not hate himself later, and checked the time. 1:45. He muttered under his breath, shut his laptop, and grabbed his jacket. Sophie was waiting at home with her shoes by the door. He pictured her sitting on the edge of the couch, jacket on, cheeks flushed, asking Mrs. Nguyen every 5 minutes when Dad would be back. He crossed the open work area in long strides, weaving between chairs and half walls. His focus narrowed to the bank of elevators at the end of the hall. He almost missed the knot of people standing near the doors. 3 members of the marketing team lingered there, cups in hand, bodies turned in toward each other in a loose circle. Their laughter cut across the hum of the floor. Liam reached for the call button. "Leaving early again, Parker," Trent said. Liam's hand paused in midair. Trent wore a blazer too tight across the shoulders and a tie with a pattern that tried too hard. He smiled with his mouth, not his eyes. "Got somewhere better to be?" Trent asked. "Or is it just more heroic single dad duty?" Liam pressed the button. "I have an appointment," he said. "Excuse me." Trent took a sip of coffee, blocking his path by half a step. "Must be nice," he said. "Come in late, leave early, bring your kid to the office. The rest of us should get on that schedule." One of his coworkers let out a short laugh and quickly covered it with a cough. "I am here when you are still in bed," Liam said. "You just do not see it." "Oh, right," Trent said. "The mysterious late-night calls, convenient." Liam's jaw clenched. "This is not the time," he said. "Move." "You know, some of us have to actually earn our paychecks," Trent said. "No built-in sympathy bonus." The words landed in the space between them, with more weight than he seemed to intend. Or maybe he did intend it. The line between careless and cruel was thin. The elevator doors slid open behind them with a quiet chime. Liam stepped to the side, ready to walk around Trent, then stopped. A familiar scent, clean and faintly floral, threaded through the sharper smells of coffee and printer toner. "I would choose your next sentence carefully," Ava said. Her voice came from behind Trent's shoulder. He stiffened. The other 2 in the group went very still. "Ms. Sterling," Trent said, turning, "we were just joking." She faced him fully. Her expression was calm, which was worse than anger. "That was not a joke," she said. "It was an indictment of your judgment." He swallowed. "I did not mean anything," he said. "You implied that one of your colleagues does not earn his pay," she said. "You implied that caring for his child is some kind of manipulation. That is something." No one in the hallway spoke. The sound of the elevator closing again unused echoed like a punctuation mark. "Liam covers more night shifts than anyone on this floor," she continued. "He was in this building before dawn 2 days ago and left after most of you were asleep. He prevented a system failure last quarter that would have cost us more than your annual budget for ad campaigns." She took a step closer. Trent actually tilted back as if he could lean away from her words. "He does that," she said, "and he still gets home to take his daughter to the doctor when she has a fever. That is not a weakness. That is competence." A flush crawled up Trent's neck. "I did not mean it that way," he repeated. "The problem," she said, "is that you did not think before you spoke. This is your only warning. If I hear anything like this again, we will discuss whether you and this company are still a match." Her tone never rose. It did not have to. "Yes, Ms. Sterling." "Miss," he said. "Back to work," she said. The small crowd broke apart quickly, scattering like birds startled from a wire. Trent took a long swallow of his coffee and walked away without another glance. The hallway emptied until only Liam and Ava remained near the elevators. He let out a breath. "You did not have to do that," he said. She turned to look at him. "Yes," she said, "I did." Her voice had changed. The hard shell was still there, but something cracked beneath it, a hairline fracture. "I am tired, Liam," she said quietly. "I am tired of listening to people call empathy a weakness while they hide behind numbers someone else bled for." He watched her trying to reconcile the woman in front of him with the one who had told him on the rooftop that love was a liability. "Every day," she said, "I watch you hold this place together and then run home to a sick child and still come back when the alarms go off in the middle of the night. I have spent years telling myself that caring is a luxury I cannot afford." She raised her eyes to his. There was a brightness there that was not entirely from the overhead lights. "It is getting harder to believe that," she said. His pulse beat harder in his throat. "People are watching," he said. "I know," she replied. "They always are." A silence stretched thick with things unsaid. He became aware of the way the light caught the strands of hair that had slipped from her bun, of the faint shadow under her eyes, of the taut line of her shoulders. "I do not know how to do this," she said. "Any of it. I know how to run a boardroom. I know how to cut a budget. I do not know how to let someone in without waiting for them to sell me out." She let out a short, unsteady breath. "But I cannot keep pretending that nothing is happening here," she added, "between us." The words hung there, impossible to ignore now that they had been said. "Liam," she said his name almost a question. He could feel his own walls, the ones built out of exhaustion and survival, and the constant need to be steady for Sophie shifting under the weight of her gaze. "You have a daughter with a fever," she said. "You should be on your way to her. I am the last person who should be making this more complicated." "Too late," he said before he could think better of it. Her mouth curved even as her eyes shone damp. Yes, she said. Too late. She reached up, fingers catching the lapels of his jacket. The movement was sharp, decisive, the way she took a position at the head of a table, except her hands trembled. For a heartbeat, he could have stepped back. Put a safer distance between them. Let this moment refreeze. He did not. She pulled him toward her. Her mouth met his. The first touch was almost clumsy, teeth bumping, breath uneven. Weeks of tension, months of friction, years of denial collided in that small space. Then his hands found her waist, steadying both of them. Her grip on his jacket loosened. The kiss settled into something deeper, no less intense for the new softness. The hallway around them seemed to fall away. The hum of fluorescent lights, the distant clack of a keyboard, the muted ding of an elevator on another floor, all blurred into a thin background noise behind the rush in his ears. He tasted coffee and sugar from the morning, something familiar and something new layered together. When they finally broke apart, both breathing harder than the short distance between them, justified neither spoke at first. Her cheeks were flushed. His hands still rested at her waist. He forced them to drop. "I am sorry," she said. She did not sound sorry. "I am not," he answered. Color rose higher along her throat. "In that case," she said, "we can both apologize later." At the far end of the hallway, half hidden by a tall potted plant, Mrs. Nguyen stood with Sophie beside her. They had stopped there on their way from the lobby, searching for Liam. Sophie's eyes were wide, but her mouth had curled into a slow, knowing smile. "I told you," she whispered to Mrs. Nguyen. "She likes sweet things." Mrs. Nguyen patted her shoulder, trying and failing to hide a grin. "You might be right," she said. By Monday, everyone knew. There had been no announcement, no memo, no accidental email. The building did not need any of that. Sterling Tower passed information along in glances and half-finished sentences. The story moved in pieces. Someone from marketing had seen them near the elevators close enough to feel the shift in the air. An assistant from the executive floor had stepped out of an office at the exact wrong moment and caught a flash of Ava's hand in Liam's jacket. Another had seen them break apart, faces flushed before the hallway swallowed the scene. By 9, the whispers had begun. "Did you hear?" one analyst asked another near the coffee machine. "Her and the infrastructure guy." "The single dad?" the other said. "That one." On the 14th floor, heads turned a little too quickly away from Liam when he walked by. Conversations cut off in mid-sentence when he entered the kitchenette. Messages popped in private chats, little notifications bearing rumors dressed up as concern. He tried to ignore it. His inbox still filled, tickets still opened and closed, servers still needed monitoring. The hum of work did not stop because the CEO had kissed someone in a hallway. Even so, he felt the change, the extra beat in the room when he stepped into a meeting, the curious measuring looks, some sympathetic, some resentful, some simply hungry for the story. He caught Maya watching him over the top of her monitor. "What?" he said under his breath as he passed her desk. "Nothing," she said. "You are terrible at nothing," he replied. She hesitated. "You okay?" she asked quietly. He thought of Ava's hands at his collar, her voice when she said she was tired of pretending, the way everything had faded out for a moment, except the feel of her mouth on his. "I have had worse Mondays," he said. The answer was not entirely true, but it was not entirely a lie. On the executive floor, the air felt thicker. Ava felt the eyes long before she saw them. Assistants glanced up and away as she walked past. A pair of junior managers at the coffee station fell silent the second she reached for a mug. Even people who prided themselves on discretion could not quite smooth their faces. Her phone buzzed with messages that did not mention anything directly, but carried more warmth or more caution than usual. A board member forwarded her an article about leadership reputations with no comment in the body of the email. She closed the browser after 2 sentences and set the phone face down on her desk. Her office looked the same as it had the week before. The desk, the computer, the plant, the view. Sophie's drawing still propped against the monitor. The crooked crown. The rain that did not touch. Something inside her did not feel the same. She had not planned to kiss him. Not in that hallway, not in public, not anywhere. She also did not regret it. Regret would have been cleaner, easier to fold and file away like a document that never should have been printed. In the absence of regret, another instinct rose. Control. For the rest of the day, she avoided the 14th floor. She sent her questions to the IT lead by email instead of appearing in person. When she needed a status update, she asked for the written report, not the verbal one. At 5:30, she left through a different bank of elevators than usual. On Tuesday, she took her private elevator down to 12 for a meeting, then back up again, skipping 14, even though stopping there would have meant a shorter walk. On Wednesday, at the time of the weekly stand-up, she sent a message to Liam's manager. "Busy, send me notes afterward." Her calendar was not actually full. She sat in her office during that half hour, reading and rereading the same paragraph of a contract while the clock ticked and the building breathed. On the 14th floor, Liam noticed. He noticed in the gaps, in the meetings where she did not appear, in the absence of heels in the hallway outside his cube, in the silence of his phone. The threads between them, invisible and new, felt stretched. He did not expect everything to change overnight. He had known even in the moment that a kiss in a public hallway with a CEO who already walked under a microscope was not a simple thing. He had expected a conversation. It did not come. Each day ended with the same question sitting in the back of his mind unanswered. At home, after Sophie was asleep, he lay on the couch with the television on mute and stared at the faint outline of his reflection in the dark screen. Mrs. Nguyen knocked once and let herself in with a container of soup. "You look like you swallowed a bee," she said, setting the soup on the table. "Just tired," he said. She studied him for a moment, then shifted to a different subject. She did not press. She had raised 3 children. She knew the shape of certain silences. By Thursday afternoon, the waiting had frayed his patience. He watched the clock tick past 3, then stood and pushed his chair back with more force than necessary. Maya glanced up. "If something catches fire, call me," he told her. "That is going to confuse me," she said. "You just left." "Computer fire," he said. "Not literal, hopefully." He took the elevator to the executive floor. The trip was short, but felt longer, like the breath before bad news. In the hallway, the carpet muted his steps. He passed the assistants' desks with a nod. Some nodded back. Some pretended intense interest in their screens. Ava's door was half closed. He knocked twice, and without waiting for an answer, he might not like, pushed it open. She looked up from her laptop, eyes narrowing for a heartbeat. "I am in the middle of something," she said. The reflexive refusal. "No," he said. "You are not. You are hiding from me." Her expression hardened. "Watch your tone, Mr. Parker," she said. "No," he said again. "We had a moment in a hallway that half this building probably knows about by now. Since then, you have been pretending I do not exist. I think I get a conversation." She set her pen down very precisely on the desk. "Close the door," she said. He stepped inside and did. The office felt smaller than usual. The windows showed the usual view of the city, gray and distant. The drawing on her desk watched from its propped-up angle. "What do you want me to say?" she asked. He took a breath. "I want you to be honest," he said. "If that kiss was something you regret, if it was about stress or guilt, or anything other than what it felt like, tell me. I will live, but I will not pretend it did not happen." The words poured out faster once he started. "I have a daughter," he said. "I have a job that depends on 100 moving pieces and a boss who can fire me if I breathe wrong. I do not have room for stories in my head that do not match reality." She watched him, arms resting on the desk, fingers interlaced. Her face gave away almost nothing. Only the faint tremor at the corner of her mouth betrayed the effort it took to keep it still. "You think I do not know any of that?" she said softly. "You think I did not hear my father's voice in my head the second I walked away from you in that hallway?" His shoulders loosened a fraction. "He would love this," she said. "He would say he told me so, that feelings make you sloppy." She stood slowly and walked around the desk. She did not come close. She stopped a few feet away, as if there were an invisible line she was not sure she could cross twice. "Regret is simple," she said. "You label something a mistake and you never think of it as anything else. I know how to do that. I have done it for years, with people, with almosts." She took a breath. "That is not what this is," she said. He swallowed. "Then what is it?" he asked. Her eyes flicked to his, then away, then back again. They were darker than usual, wide open. "It is me failing at the one rule I set for myself," she said. "Do not let anyone get close enough to hit where it hurts. Do not let anyone become a factor you cannot control." Her voice gained strength as she spoke. "Every time I see you with Sophie," she said, "every time you say goodnight to a server before you go home to read to her, every time you stand up in a room you have no business speaking in just because it is right, I feel something I told myself I did not need." She let the words settle between them. "I am avoiding you," she said, "not because I regret what happened, but because I do not know how to be this person when people are watching, when Richard is sharpening knives, when my entire life has been built on choices that said safety over everything else." Her hand lifted, then fell. "But when I kissed you," she said quietly, "for the first time in a long time, I was not thinking about optics, or board votes, or what story the market might tell. I stopped lying, to you, to myself. Silence spread out, filled with the faint hum of the ventilation system and the distant sound of a phone ringing at another desk. Liam's chest felt tight in a way that was not entirely unpleasant. "You could have said that on Monday," he said. Her mouth quirked. "I was busy panicking," she said. A short breath of almost laughter broke through his tension. "That I can believe," he said. She stepped closer, one small move that cut the distance in half. "This is not something I know how to do," she said. "I will probably make a mess of it. I will possibly hurt you, not on purpose, out of habit." He studied her face, the straight line of her nose, the faint smudge of fatigue under her eyes. "I have habits too," he said. "Guardrails, emergency exits, we can compare notes." The corner of her mouth lifted. "I do not want to keep you at arm's length," she said. "I also do not want to cost you your job, or your peace, or your daughter's stability." "You are not that powerful," he said. Her eyebrows rose. "In my apartment," he added. "At work is another story." She almost smiled. Before either of them could say more, there was a light knock at the door. A small voice followed it. "Dad?" Both of them turned. The door opened a crack. Sophie stood in the gap with her backpack still on. Mrs. Nguyen hovered behind her, clearly unsure if she should have turned back. "We were going to meet you by the elevators," Mrs. Nguyen said. "She heard you were up here." "It is okay," Liam said. "You are fine." Sophie slipped inside, eyes sweeping the room. They landed on Ava and stayed there. "Hi," Sophie said. "Hello," Ava replied. Sophie looked from one adult to the other, taking in the space between them, the way their shoulders leaned just slightly inward. "Are you going to be nicer to my dad now?" she asked. The question dropped into the room with astonishing precision. Liam closed his eyes for half a second. "Sophie," he said. A sound escaped Ava. Not quite a bark of laughter, not quite a sob. Something in between. She pressed a hand lightly to her mouth, and to her own surprise felt tears prick behind her eyes. "Yes," she managed, her voice uneven. "I am going to try." Sophie considered this answer with the seriousness of a judge. "Good," she said, "because he really likes you. He just pretends he does not." Liam choked on air. "A very honest child," Ava said. "She gets it from her father," Mrs. Nguyen said from the doorway. Ava met Liam's gaze over Sophie's head. There was water in her eyes now, but there was something else too, a lightness that had not been there when he walked in. "Noted," she said. Sophie walked over, and without hesitation, slipped her small hand into Ava's. The contact was small and warm and unexpected. "You do not have to be scary all the time," Sophie said. "Just when people are mean." Ava let out a breath that turned into a laugh, the tears finally spilling over. "I will take that under advisement," she said. The room felt different after that. The lines that had been so rigid a week before seemed less fixed, as if someone had taken a pen and started to sketch new paths over an old blueprint. 2 weeks later, the rain finally broke. Sunlight pushed through the clouds, like it had forgotten how landing on the glass of Sterling Tower in sharp, clean angles. People squinted on their way into the lobby, digging sunglasses out of bags they had not touched in months. Ava sat in her office with her blinds half open, the city laid out beneath her. The brighter light made everything look sharper, less forgiving. She scrolled through her inbox, mechanically deleting what could be deleted, flagging what could not. An email from the board chair sat near the top, marked high priority. Subject: emergency session, Thursday. She had already read it 3 times. The body was brief, formal language about concerns raised by key investors, a request for her presence at a closed meeting. No agenda attached, but one did not need to be. Not with the way Richard's comments in the last board session had shifted. Not with the way rumors had thickened ever since. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from her father flagged as missed. "Call me." She muted the phone and set it in a drawer, closing it with a solid push. On her desk, Sophie's drawing watched her from its spot beside the monitor. The crown floated above the woman's head. The small figure in the yellow coat standing close beside, rain falling around them in straight blue lines. Ava's gaze caught on the little girl's crayon smile. "You are not invited to this one," she said under her breath. On the 14th floor, Liam ended a call and rubbed at the bridge of his nose. He had been up late the night before, patching a set of minor vulnerabilities before they could become bigger problems. His eyes itched. An instant message popped up from Jenna, one of the assistants on the executive floor. "You did not hear it from me. Emergency board session today at 3. Topic: leadership, optics, and risk." His jaw tightened. He typed back, "Thanks for the heads up." She replied with a single line, "You might want to be around." He glanced at the clock, just after 1. Sophie had a short day at school on Thursdays. Mrs. Nguyen usually picked her up, oversaw homework, and fed her an early dinner when he had late meetings. He stared at the screen for another moment, then stood. At 2:30, he walked into the lobby holding Sophie's hand. She swung their joined arms as they crossed the marble, her backpack bumping against her side. "Is this a grown-up meeting day?" she asked. "Something like that," he said. She looked around, taking in the busy front desk, the constant movement of people, the shimmer of the security gates. "Are you in trouble?" she asked. "Not directly," he said. "What does that mean?" she asked. "It means I am here in case someone I care about needs backup," he said. She nodded like that made perfect sense. Carl scanned their badges. "Different time of day for you two," he said. "You waiting on someone?" "We are," Liam said. Carl glanced up toward the higher floors and seemed to put a few things together. He gave a slow, sympathetic nod. "Well," he said, "you know where the chairs are?" They found a spot near the cluster of seats by the big windows. The afternoon light poured across the lobby, catching motes of dust in the air. People moved in and out, conversations rising and falling in low waves. Sophie dug into her backpack and pulled out a notebook and a handful of markers. "How long is the meeting?" she asked. "Too long," he said. "Draw something, it helps." "For you or for me?" she asked. "For both of us," he said. On the top floor, the boardroom doors closed with a heavy sound that swallowed the hum of the hallway. The room smelled faintly of coffee and polished wood. A long table stretched from one end to the other, pitchers of water sweating onto coasters. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed the city in full daylight, no rain to blur the outlines. Ava sat at the head of the table. The chair felt the same under her, but her body felt different in it, as if the past 2 weeks had subtly rearranged her center of gravity. Richard sat 3 seats down on the right, scrolling through something on his tablet with unnecessary emphasis. The board chair, a woman named Elena, with steel gray hair and a careful presence, sat on Ava's left. The others filled in around them, some with their own devices, some with printed packets. "We should begin," Elena said. Richard cleared his throat. "Thank you all for making time," he said. "I know everyone's schedules are busy." Ava kept her hands folded on the table. Her watch rested against the inside of her wrist, cool and precise. "We have a situation," Richard said. "I wish it were not necessary to address it, but the market does not run on wishes. It runs on perception." He tapped his tablet, and a chart appeared on the screen at the end of the room. Mentions of sterling dynamics on social media. A handful of headlines from small tech blogs. A blurry photo of 2 figures near an elevator close enough that the shape of them told a story, even if their faces did not. "Rumors spread," he said. "Investors ask questions. They wonder if their capital is stewarded by someone who understands boundaries." Ava looked at the photo only long enough to confirm what she already knew. Then she looked away. "This is not about anyone's personal life," Richard continued in a tone that suggested the opposite. "It is about risk. A CEO engaged in a relationship with a direct subordinate is an HR minefield. It is a liability in any future lawsuit. It invites accusations of favoritism at best, abuse of power at worst." A board member on the far side, a man named Gupta, with careful eyes, shifted in his chair. "Are there accusations?" he asked, "or only speculation?" "Speculation becomes narrative faster than you think," Richard said. "Our responsibility is to preempt damage, not wait for it. We have a fiduciary duty." He turned slightly, focusing his attention on Ava. "No one is questioning the last few quarters of performance," he said. "You have delivered. But leadership is not just numbers. It is trust. It is how the company looks from the outside." There it was again. Optics, perception. "What exactly are you proposing?" Elena asked. "We need to send a signal," he said. "To employees, to the market, to ourselves." He paused as if rehearsing the lines. "The appropriate course," Maki said, "is clear. Ms. Sterling should make a public statement ending the relationship in question. The employee involved should be transferred to a different division where there is no direct line, preferably to a less critical function. If that is not feasible, we suggest his resignation." The room cooled. "No," Ava said. The word left her before she could smooth it into something more palatable. Richard blinked. "I do not believe you heard me fully," he said. "I heard you," she said. "You are asking me to punish a man for being involved in something that, if we are being honest, I initiated. You are asking me to send a message that the company comes first and people come last. I am not confused about what you are asking." Richard's mouth thinned. "When did you become sentimental?" he asked. "When I realized how much of my life I had handed over to people like you to evaluate and exploit," she said evenly. Elena's gaze flicked between them, assessing. Ava, she said, no one here wants an unnecessary scandal. The press loves stories about powerful women who slip. We are not talking about press, Ava said. We are talking about a single engineer who does his job better than most of the people speculating about his private life. We are talking about an assumption that any feeling automatically impairs judgment. She felt her father's voice rise behind her thoughts. They will eat you alive if you show them anything soft. Her fingers moved toward her watch. She unfastened the clasp, the metal sliding against her skin, and set it on the table in front of her. She did it quietly, but the motion felt loud to her. My father used to say that caring is a weakness, she said. That if you hold anything as more important than the balance sheet, you do not deserve to sit at this table. Richard smiled faintly. Your father built this company, he said. He was not wrong. He built the company, she said. He also built a culture that eats its own when they hesitate for a second. She thought of Liam in the server room, at 2 a.m, tape on his watch strap, eyes gritty with lack of sleep. She thought of Sophie's small hand wrapping around hers in the office, the trust in that simple touch. I spent years following his rules, she said. I made decisions the way he would have. I delivered numbers that made him and you in the market happy. She paused. Here is another number, she said. 0. That is how many times in those years I let anyone get close enough to matter. It was efficient. It was lonely. Gupta leaned forward. Ava, he said, we are not your enemies here. Richard is not entirely wrong, another board member said carefully. Workplace relationships at that level can be complicated. There are real concerns. I am not pretending there are no risks, Ava said. I am saying that making an example of someone who has done nothing but his job and done it well is not leadership. It is cowardice dressed up as prudence. She looked each of them in the eye. If you want to talk risk, she said, consider the risk of showing every engineer in this building that the second their private life makes someone uncomfortable, they are expendable. Consider what it does to retention when they see us throw one of their own under a bus to appease gossip. She heard Sophie's voice in her head very clear. You do not have to be scary all the time, just when people are mean. She let a small, humorless smile touch her mouth. Liam Parker is not a distraction, she said. He is not a liability. He has kept our systems alive through outages that would have made the front page if he had not. He is raising a child on his own and still shows up every time this building needs him, usually when no one else is here to see it. Richard opened his mouth, but she lifted a hand. I will not transfer him as if he has done something wrong, she said. I will not encourage him to resign. I will not issue a public statement about my personal life to soothe the markets like they are anxious relatives. You risk your position, Richard said. Are you really willing to do that over a technician and some schoolyard crush? Her jaw tightened. You underestimate him, she said, and you underestimate me. She sat a little straighter. If the board believes that my willingness to treat the people who keep this company running as more than interchangeable parts makes me unfit to lead, then we should have that vote. Today. The word hung in the air. Vote. Elena inhaled slowly. None of us called this session to remove you, she said. We called it because we saw a storm forming and wanted to understand how you plan to stand in it. I just told you, Ava said. I will stand in it as myself, not as a ghost of my father, not as a model CEO in a case study, me. Gupta broke the silence first. The performance under Ava has been objectively strong, he said. Markets care about results. They also care about continuity. Talk of leadership turnover would do more immediate damage than gossip buried in the 3rd paragraph of a blog. Another member nodded. I agree, she said. We can work with HR to tighten policies to set guidelines to ensure no conflict of interest affects reviews or promotions. We do not need to exile anyone to prove we are responsible. Eyes turned one after another away from Richard and toward Elena. Richard's mouth flattened, but he did not press for a vote. He knew when numbers were not in his favor. Elena looked back at Ava. Your relationship with this employee must be disclosed formally, she said. You will recuse yourself from any decisions that directly affect his role or compensation. That is reasonable, Ava said. And, Elena added, you will be aware that the scrutiny will not ease for a while. I have lived under a microscope my entire career, Ava said. I can handle a few more lenses. The meeting ended not with a dramatic conclusion, but with the gradual scraping of chairs and the soft thud of folders closing. People left in clusters, voices low. Some touched Ava's shoulder on the way out, small gestures of tacit support. Richard left without looking at her. She sat for a moment after the room emptied the space, feeling oddly hollow. Her watch still lay on the table. She picked it up, turned it in her hand, then slipped it into her pocket instead of back onto her wrist. In the lobby, the afternoon had tilted toward early evening. The light through the tall windows warmed to a softer gold. Sophie sat cross-legged on one of the chairs, a fresh drawing spread on her knees. Crayon colors filled the page. Liam sat beside her foot, tapping in an uneven rhythm. He tried not to look toward the elevators every 5 seconds. He failed. "You are making me dizzy," Sophie said without looking up. "Sorry," he said. "She is going to come down," Sophie said. "That is what meetings do. They end." "You would think," he said. She added a line of blue at the top of the page. "Is she in trouble?" she asked. "Not in the way you were thinking," he said. "People like to argue about who should be in charge of things. Sometimes those arguments get sharp." "Does she have to leave?" Sophie asked. He swallowed. "I do not know," he said. Before Sophie could reply, the elevator on the far side opened with a soft ring. Ava stepped out. She wore the same suit she had worn into the boardroom, but something in the way she moved had shifted. A tension had eased from her shoulders. Her hands were empty, no tablet, no stack of papers used as armor. Her eyes found Liam and Sophie almost at once. She walked toward them, heels quiet against the marble. People in the lobby noticed and looked away too late. A few tried to act as if they were not watching. The air changed. Liam stood. "How did it go?" he asked. She stopped in front of him. "There was discussion," she said. "That sounds vague," he said. She took a breath, then reached for his hand. Her fingers threaded through his. "I told them I would not throw you under a bus to make anyone feel safer," she said. "I told them if kindness ruined my image, they could find another image." He stared at her, the words sinking in. "And," he said, "and they decided they prefer a CEO who delivers results and occasionally makes inconvenient choices to no CEO at all," she said. Her mouth curved, tired but real. "I chose you," she said. "I chose us." The words settled between them. Us. Behind them, Sophie let out a breath she had been holding. "So you are not going away," she said. "Not unless they change the locks," Ava said. Sophie hopped off the chair, the drawing fluttering to the floor. "Good," she said, "because we were going to ask you something." Ava glanced at Liam. "Were you?" she said. Sophie nodded. "Will you come to dinner?" she asked. "At our house. Not fancy. Mrs. Nguyen makes soup. Dad tries not to burn garlic bread." Liam made a noise of protest. "I am perfectly capable of not burning garlic bread," he said. "You burn it 50% of the time," Sophie said. 50 is still failing in school," Ava said. A laugh escaped her, surprising even her own ears. "I would like that," she said, "if you are both sure." Liam squeezed her hand. "We are sure," he said. Around them, people went back to pretending they were not looking. Conversations resumed, slightly forced at first, then more naturally. Outside, the sunlight caught on the wet edges of the city, turning puddles into small mirrors. Inside, 3 people stood in the middle of the lobby, their outlines overlapping in the polished floor. Sunday tasted different in the air. The rain had taken the morning off, leaving the sky a high, pale blue with thin clouds stretched across it. The park near Liam's apartment wore early autumn like a light coat. Some trees were still green, others had started to turn patches of red and gold tucked among the leaves. Liam and Sophie walked along the path toward the playground, Sophie skipping every few steps, her boots crunching on dry leaves. She carried her sketchbook under one arm as if it were something that might get snatched by the wind. "Do you think she will be there first?" Sophie asked. "She likes being early," he said, "most of the time." "You like being on time," Sophie said, "most of the time." "That is true," he said. "What does that make me?" she asked. "The reason I move faster," he said. She grinned. They rounded a bend and saw the swing set, the slide, the benches that circled the small grassy area. A few families dotted the space. A father pushed a stroller. A couple threw a ball for a dog. Ava stood by one of the benches, hands tucked into the pockets of a navy coat that looked softer than the sharp dark ones she wore to the office. Her hair was down for once, waves brushing her shoulders, catching the light. A small brown paper package rested beside her on the bench, tied with a simple string. She looked up as they approached. "You beat us," Liam said. "I had help," she said. "Your directions were very precise." Sophie dropped her sketchbook on the bench and wrapped her arms around Ava's middle in a quick, firm hug. "You came," she said. "I did," Ava answered, her hand landing on Sophie's back in an instinctive pat that settled into something like an embrace. "I hear there is a park that needed inspection." "It passed," Sophie said, "but we have to test the swings again." "That sounds like critical work," Ava said. Sophie rolled her eyes in an exaggerated way that reminded Liam of himself in every parent-teacher conference he had ever attended. "Can I go do one swing?" she asked. "1 million," Liam said. She gave him a look. "Start with 10, Ava said. "We can renegotiate." Sophie darted toward the swing sketchbook, forgotten for the moment. Her boots thudded on the packed dirt or then brushed the air as she launched herself. Liam watched her for a moment, then turned to Ava. "How was dinner?" he asked, with the soup and the terrifying garlic bread. She smiled small and real. "Mrs. Nguyen's soup could solve international conflicts," she said. "Your garlic bread was only slightly singed." "Progress," he said. "And Sophie insisted on showing me every drawing she has made since kindergarten," Ava added. "She curated it down," he said. That was the short version. He let the quiet settle between them for a moment, an easy one this time. The sounds of the park floated around them, a dog bark, a child yelling from the slide, a bike bell somewhere down the path. Ava reached for the brown paper package on the bench. "I brought you something," she said. He blinked. "What is the occasion?" he asked. "Sunday," she said, "and the fact that I am not allowed to complain about your watch anymore unless I attempt to fix the problem." He glanced down at his wrist. The tape on the strap had loosened and been replaced twice since the night in the server room. The face was more scratched than ever. "You do not have to buy me things," he said. "I know," she replied. "That is why I did it." She handed him the package. The paper felt thick with a faint waxy texture. He slipped a finger under the knot of the string and worked it loose, being more careful than he needed to be. The paper unfolded to reveal a small dark box. Inside, nestled in a soft lining, was a watch. It was not the kind her father would have approved of for a CEO. It was not ostentatious or covered in unnecessary embellishments. It had a simple round face, brushed steel case, and a dark leather strap that looked sturdy and worn in even though it had never been touched. The hands were thin and clean, the numbers clear. He lifted it out. It was heavier than his old one, but not by much. Balanced. "You did not need to," he said. "I know," she said again. "Humor me." He turned it over. On the back, engraved in small letters, were 3 words. "You are on time." His throat tightened. "That was Sophie's suggestion," Ava said. "I wanted something more subtle. She said no." He swallowed and laughed, the sound catching for a second. "Of course she did," he said. "There is something else," Ava added. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, similar weight to the one in the box, but softer at the edges from being handled. "We had homework," she said, "last week." He unfolded it. 3 figures stood under a sky full of crayon blue. Not rain this time, but a bright stripe at the top. That might have been clear sky. The figures held hands. One was tall, one shorter, with hair that curled outward, and one small with a messy ponytail. Above them, a large umbrella arched, protecting all 3. On the umbrella, Sophie had drawn small stars. At the bottom, in careful block letters, she had written 2 words. "My family." Liam's chest ached in a way that felt strangely welcome. "When did you 2 conspire to do this?" he asked. "She did the art," Ava said. "I contributed umbrella consulting." "Important role," he said. "We agreed the rain could stay," she said. "It just does not have to land in the same place every time." He looked up at her. Her eyes were steady on his, a hint of uncertainty beneath the composed surface, as if she were bracing for him to tell her this was too much, too fast, too something. "I like it," he said. "Only like," she asked. He shook his head, a small helpless motion. "I love it," he said. Behind them, Sophie called out, "Dad, Ms. Sterling, look how high I am." They turned. She had pumped her legs hard enough that the swing carried her almost parallel to the ground. For a moment, hair streaming behind her, laughter carried on the air. "Do not flip over the bar," Liam called. "Bombal CDD, OBD gisti gisti gisidid." "That is not physically possible," Sophie said. "That is exactly what worries me," he replied. Ava watched her, something soft in her face. "She trusts you," Liam said quietly. "She decided I am a project," Ava replied. "She is very committed to it." He slipped his old watch off his wrist, the taped strap catching for a second, and replaced it with the new one. The leather hugged his skin, the weight settling there as if it had been waiting for that spot. "You are allowed to let yourself have things that last," Ava said. He looked at her. "So are you," he said. A breeze moved through the trees, sending a small shower of leaves down around them. One landed in Ava's hair. He reached up without thinking and brushed it away. His fingers touched her temple for half a second, skin warm under the cooler air. She did not flinch. Sophie slowed the swing and jumped off, landing with a small thud. She ran back to them, cheeks flushed, breathing fast. "Did you see?" she asked. "We had front row seats," Liam said. She looked at the watch on his wrist. "You put it on," she said. "Of course," he said. "I would be in trouble if I did not." "It looks better than the taped one," she said. "Less like it came from a cereal box." He gasped. "Traitor," he said. She ignored him and turned to Ava. "Are we walking?" she asked. "Mrs. Nguyen said there is a path with a bridge and ducks." "There is," Liam said, "if we take the long route back." "Then let us take the long route," Ava said. They started down the path together, Sophie in the middle by habit, her hands reaching out to grab theirs. Liam's fingers closed around hers on one side, Ava's on the other. The three of them walked beneath a canopy of leaves that filtered the light. Gravel crunched under their shoes. Somewhere ahead, water murmured where the small creek bent under a wooden bridge. A jogger passed, earbuds in. A couple with a stroller sidestepped to give them space. No one here looked twice at them. They were just another trio on a Sunday. Halfway to the bridge, the air changed. The light dimmed a touch, as if someone had turned down a dimmer switch in the sky. A drop of water hit Liam's cheek. He glanced up. Small, fine raindrops spotted the path, darkening the dust. "Of course," he said. "Seattle could not let us have one dry afternoon." Sophie stuck out her tongue to catch a drop and giggled. "It is only a little," she said. "We are okay." Ava reached into her bag and pulled out a compact umbrella. This one was not gray like the one she carried for work. It was navy blue with small white dots, almost like stars. She shook it open with a practiced flick and lifted it above them. "Come here," she said. Sophie moved closer at once, pressing into her side. Liam stepped in, the three of them fitting under the circle of fabric. It was not quite big enough to give each of them their own dry space. Shoulders brushed, arms bumped. "Cozy," Liam said. "Spatially efficient," Ava answered. "Sneaky," Sophie added. "Now, neither of you can run away if you get embarrassed." They laughed at the sound overlapping. The rain picked up a little pattering on the umbrella in a steady drum. A few drops made it past the edge, landing cool on their faces. Liam felt one slide down his neck. Sophie squealed when another hit her nose. Ava watched a drop gather on the rim, then fall onto the back of her hand. She did not step away. She tilted her face slightly toward the open edge, letting a few more drops touch her skin. They were cold, sharp, real. The umbrella held over all three of them, the same way it did in the drawing folded in Liam's pocket. They reached the small wooden bridge. Water moved quietly beneath it, clear and shallow, speckled with fallen leaves. A duck paddled near the bank, then darted away when Sophie leaned over the railing to wave. "Careful," Liam said, hovering close. Ava stood on her other side, one hand light on her shoulder. The rain softened again, then thinned, leaving behind damp wood and air that smelled clean. They crossed to the other side and continued along the path, the umbrella closed, now hanging from Ava's fingers. Sophie swung their joined hands, humming a song that shifted in and out of tune. Liam glanced at the watch on his wrist. The time was early yet. No alarms, no emergency calls, no looming meetings. Just the slow count of seconds and the sound of footsteps on wet gravel. He looked at Ava. She caught his eye and, without needing an explanation, smiled. For the first time in a long while, when the next small cluster of raindrops fell from a branch overhead and landed on her face, she did not wipe them away. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story.